the next set of questions will be for experienced people. Okay, so like those people who have 2 to 3 years of experience in SQL. So this set of questions will be very beneficial to those candidates. So let's move ahead with this question. So the next question over here is, what is the difference between SQL and NoSQL? So as you can see on the screen, this is the table where we have mentioned the differences between SQL and NoSQL. So SQL works on relational databases, whereas NoSQL works on non-relational databases. So SQL stores data in tables based on schema so that data are organized and structured. Okay, so in NoSQL, no specific method is followed for data storage, so it offers flexibility in storing data. If you talk about the SQL, so here it is easy to execute the complex queries, whereas in NoSQL, it is very difficult to execute complex queries. So scaling is performed vertically, increasing the process power of servers. And in NoSQL, the scaling is performed horizontally, adding more servers and nodes. Okay, so basically in SQL, we have the vertical scaling, and in NoSQL, we have the horizontal scaling. So in simple words, vertical scaling is nothing but increasing the capacity of the existing servers. And the horizontal scaling is nothing but adding more nodes rather than increasing the capacity of the existing servers. What you do is you add more servers along with the existing servers. So this is nothing but the horizontal scaling. So if you talk about SQL, so SQL satisfied ACID properties such as atomicity. I repeat. So if you talk about SQL, so SQL satisfied ACID properties such as atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Okay, and the NoSQL databases follows the CAP theory, which is nothing but out of consistency, availability, and partition tolerance, any two parameters can be present in any SQL database. And this is the most important criteria of a NoSQL database. So this was the difference between SQL and NoSQL. The next question over here is, what is the difference between SQL and MySQL? Okay, so SQL is the programming language and MySQL is the RDBMS, or you can say the Relational Database Management System. So SQL is used for querying the relational database systems, whereas MySQL is used to store, modify, and delete data in a database in an organized manner. So SQL is a licensed product of the Microsoft. Okay, whereas MySQL is open source platform managed by Oracle Corporation. So SQL provides adequate protection to SQL servers against the intruders. Okay, so if you talk about MySQL, so since it is open source, security cannot be reliable over here. If you talk about SQL, it doesn't support any connectors. So in case of MySQL, support connectors are available, such as the Workbench tool, which is used to build the databases. So this was all about the difference between SQL and MySQL. The next question over here is, what is the difference between index and view? So generally, an index is created in a separate table. So they are the pointers that indicate the address of a data in a database table. So an index helps speed up the querying and the data retrieval process in a database. And now if you talk about the view, so view is a virtual table created from rows and columns of one or more tables. So the main thing about a view is that rows and columns are grouped logically. So with the support of the views, you can restrict access to the entire data in the database. The next question over here is, what is the use of views, and mention the various types of views in SQL. So views are the virtual database tables created by selecting rows and columns from one or more tables in a database. So they support developers in multiple ways, such as simplifying complex queries, restricting access to queries, and summarizing data from many tables. So basically, there are two types of views, as you can see on the screen, the system-defined views and the user-defined views. So system-defined views can be used for specific purposes and perform specific actions only. It provides all of the information and properties of database and tables. And if you talk about the user-defined views, so they are created as per the requirements of the users. So they are routines that accept parameters, perform complex functions, and return a value. The next question over here is, compare long and LOB data types. So this table over here helps us understand the difference between long and LOB data type. So if you talk about the long data type, so it helps in storing large scale semi-structured and unstructured data. Whereas if you talk about the LOB data type, so it is known as the large object. It is used to store large size data. So now if you talk about the actual size of data, so long stores up to 2 GB of data and LOB stores up to 4 GB of data. If you talk about the long data type, so it is very difficult to maintain, whereas the LOB data type supports manipulating and accessing data easily. In the long data type, a table can have only one long column, whereas in LOB data type, a table can have multiple LOB columns where LOB type data is stored. So in the long data type, subqueries cannot, I repeat. So in the long data type, subqueries cannot select long data types, whereas in LOB data type, subqueries can select LOB data types. And the last point of comparison over here is that in long data type, access data is done only sequentially. And in LOB data type, accessing data can be done randomly. Okay, I hope this clears the difference between the long data type and the LOB data type. So the next question over here is, what is the difference between zero and null values in SQL? So when a field in a column doesn't have any value, it is said to be having a null value. So in simple words, null is the blank field in a table. So it can be considered as an unassigned, unknown, or an unavailable value. On the contrary, zero is a number and it is an available, assigned, and a known value. The next question is, what is the difference between an inner join and an outer join? So as you can see on the screen, this is the difference between inner join and outer join. So in case of inner join, it is the intersection of two tables. Okay, whereas the outer join is the union of two tables. If you talk about the inner join, it only retrieves the rows that are common to both the tables, or you can say common to the two tables. Whereas in case of outer join, it retrieves the rows common to two tables, but all the values of one table. Okay, so this was the difference between an inner join and an outer join. The next question over here is, what is database testing and what are its benefits? So database testing is also known as the backend testing. It consists of the SQL queries executed to validate database operations, data structures, and attributes of a database. It helps to ensure the data integrity by eliminating duplicate entries of data in a database, failing to which it will create many problems while managing the database. Besides, it also deals with the test table items hidden and not visible to the users. The next question over here is, what is database black box testing? So black box testing helps to examine the functionality of a database. It is performed by validating the integration level of a database. The incoming and the outgoing data are verified by various test cases such as the cause-effect graphing technique, equivalence partitioning, and boundary value analysis. So this kind of testing can be performed at early stages of the development to ensure better performance. The next question over here is, what is the use of defaults in SQL? So in a database, default values are substituted when no value is assigned to a field in a table column. So basically, each column can be specified with a default value. So in this way, SQL Server Management Studio specifies default values which can be created only for the current databases. So here you must understand that if the default value exceeds the size of the column field, then it will be truncated automatically. The next question over here is, what do you mean by SQL injection and how can you avoid it? So SQL injection is a malicious attack sent targeting a SQL Server instance. So it is usually sent through strings of statements and passed into SQL Server for execution. So to avoid SQL injection, all the statements must be verified for malicious vulnerabilities before allowing for execution. So in addition to that, the following methods can be applied to avoid SQL injections, such as using type-safe SQL parameters, using parameterized input with stored procedures. You can also use filtering inputs. Apart from that, you can use reviewing codes and wrapping parameters. So these are some of the techniques which you can use to avoid SQL injections. The next question over here is, what do you mean by autonomous transaction? So an autonomous transaction is an independent transaction initiated by a transaction that is the main transaction. So this holds the main transaction, it performs SQL operations and commits or rollbacks. So after that, it resumes the main transaction. So here you must note that autonomous transaction doesn't share locks and resources with the main transaction. The next question over here is, write the SQL statements that can be used to return even number records and odd number records. So guys, here you must understand that this is a scenario based question. So here the interviewer wants you to write a few SQL statements. So in this case, you have to write two statements which will return even number records and odd number records. So suppose your database has 100 records in the table, in the database table. So in the first query, you have to return the records which are even number based, such as 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. And in the second query or the second statement, you have to retrieve the records which are odd based, such as 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. So for retrieving the even number records from a table, we can use the statement such as select star from table. So table basically here means the table name, where ID, which is the first column of the table, and this is the modulus, or you can say the remainder operator, and this is 2, which is equal to 0. Okay, so if you divide the ID of the table with 2, and if the remainder is 0, so you have to retrieve all of those records. So this is the statement that you can use for this purpose. And if you talk about the records which are odd number based from the table, so for that you have to use, so based on this one, select star from table, which is basically the table name, where ID modulus 2 or the remainder 2 is not equal to 0. Okay, so here all of the records will be fetched which are based on odd numbers. So let's move to the next question. So what do you mean by alias in SQL? So SQL aliases help to assign temporary names for a table or a column. So it is used to simplify table or column names, and aliases can exist only for that query period. It can be created using the AS keyword. Okay, and here you must understand that creation of an alias is in no way affecting the column names in the database. Okay, since the column names in the database are permanent, alias is only a temporary name. So this can be applied when more than one table is involved in a particular query. So guys, the next question is, and this I believe is a very important question for the experienced candidates. So here the question is, what do you understand, or like what is the difference between OLAP and OLTP? So OLAP stands for Online Analytical Processing, and it consists of tools used for data analysis that will be used for making up better decisions. It can work on multiple database systems, historical data, and provide valuable insights. So for example, Netflix and Spotify generate insights from the past data. And now if we talk about the OLTP, so here OLTP means online transaction processing, and it works on operational data. So OLTP manages ACID properties during transaction. I hope you remember the ACID properties that we discussed in the difference between SQL and NoSQL databases. So specifically, it performs faster than OLAP so that it can be used in online ticket booking, messaging services, and so on. The next question over here is, what do you mean by data inconsistency? So data inconsistency occurs when the same data exists in many tables in different formats. In other words, the same information about an object or a person may be spread across the database in various places, creating duplication. So it decreases the reliability of the data and decreases the query performance significantly. To overcome this drawback, we can use constraints on the database. The next question is, what do you mean by collation in SQL? So collation allows to sort and compare data with predefined rules. So these rules help to store, access, and compare data effectively. The collation rules are applied while executing insert, select, update, and delete operations. So SQL servers can store objects that have different collations in a single database. So here you must understand that collation offers case sensitivity and accent sensitivity for data sets. The next question is how to create a table from an existing table. So this is another scenario based question. And here the interviewer wants to know that whether you have hands-on experience using SQL. So copy of a table can be created from an existing table using the combination of create and select statements. So using these statements, you can select all the columns or specific columns from an existing table. So as a result, the new table will be replaced with all of the values of the existing tables. So here the where clause can select the specific columns from the table. And now if you talk about the syntax, so as you can see on the screen, this is the syntax for creating a table from an existing table. So create table and the new table name, and this is the AS part. AS part is nothing but an alias, as we had discussed in the previous part of this session. And here you have the select query. So select column 1, column 2, and any number of columns from existing table name, which is the base table or the parent table from which we are creating another table. Okay. And after that, you specify the where clause. And what do you specify over here? So here you can specify the condition that you want for selecting the columns from the existing tables. Okay, so suppose there are 5 columns in this existing table. Okay, so out of that, you have to select only 3 columns based upon some condition. So that condition can be specified in this where clause, or you can say the where part of this create. Okay, so this is the overall syntax of creating a table from an existing table. So the next question over here is how to fetch common records from 2 tables. So we can fetch common records using intersect commands in SQL. So the main thing about this statement is that it returns only the common records. It means that this statement helps to eliminate duplication of data. And now if you talk about the syntax, so as you can see on the screen, this is an example that we have used over here. So select customer ID from sales.customers, and here we are using this intersect. Okay, and what do you mention in intersect? So here you mention another query, select customer ID from sales.orders, where, and this is the condition, where month order date equal to December. Okay, so here in this query, we are selecting the customer IDs from the orders and of particular month, December. Using this query, we will fetch common records from 2 tables, sales.customers and sales.orders. The next question is, what are the common clauses used with select statements? So the common clauses such as for, order by, group by, and having are used with the select statements. So if you talk about the for clause, so it specifies the different formats for viewing the result sets such as browser mode cursor, XML, JSON, and so on. And now if you talk about order by clause, so this clause sorts the data which is returned by a query in a specific order. So it helps us to determine the order for ranking functions. Now, if you talk about the group by clause, so this clause basically groups the result set of the select statements. And what does it return? It returns 1 row per group. And the 4th clause over here is the having clause. So this clause is used with group by clause, and it specifies search condition for a group. The next question over here is, what do you mean by coalesce, and describe any 2 properties of coalesce functions? So coalesce is an expression that evaluates arguments in a list and only returns non-null values. So for example, if you consider the statements, select coalesce null 14 and 15. So this statement will return 14 after the execution, since the first value is the null in this argument list. Okay. And now if you talk about the properties of coalesce functions, so here the data type must be same, and it functions as a syntactic shortcut for the case expression. So these are the properties, or you can say the highlights of coalesce functions. The next question is, what is the use of merge statement? So merge allows combining the insert, delete, and update functions all together. So this statement can be applied when 2 statements have complex matching characteristics. So though the merge statement seems to be complex, it provides much more advantages to the developers when they get familiar with this statement. So basically, it reduces the IO operations significantly and allows to read data only from the source. The next question over here is, what is the use of clause in SQL? So clauses are nothing but the built-in functions of SQL. So they help to retrieve the data very quickly and efficiently. So clauses are much needed for developers when there is a large volume of data in a database. The result set of clauses would be a pattern group, or an ordered format. And now if we talk about the various clauses that are used in SQL, so there are various clauses such as where, or, and, like, limit, order by, group by. The next question is how to change a table name in SQL. So if you need to rename a table name in SQL, you can use the rename object statement. And how do you use that? So there are basically 3 steps over here. So first, what you do is you connect to the database engine in the Object Explorer. Then you select a new query on the standard bar, and then you write the query and execute it. So for your reference, I have attached a screenshot over here. So here it says use the AdventureWorks 2012, which is the database. Okay, and then you have the go statement, and after that you have the query. So then you have to execute the statement. So here you have this SP rename. This is the sales territory, and this is the new name, sales ter. Okay, so using this statement, like once you execute this query, so the table name will be changed. So guys, with this we have covered questions, like a set of questions which was meant for the experienced folks. Okay, and now like from question number 70 onwards till 100. So this set of questions will be for the advanced folks, like who have more than 5 years of experience in SQL. So these are very high level questions that we will be covering. And let's begin with the 70th question. So this question says, what are the differences between SQL and PL SQL? So as you can see on the screen, this is the table which highlights the difference between SQL and PL SQL. So SQL is nothing but a structured query language, and PL SQL is a procedural language where SQL statements are processed effectively. In case of SQL, only a single operation can be performed at a time, whereas in case of PL SQL, group of operations as a single block can be performed at a time. In case of SQL, it executes the queries such as create table, delete table, and insert table, like insert into tables. And in case of PL SQL, it is used to write program blocks, functions, procedures, triggers, packages, cursors, and so on. So SQL is mainly used to retrieve data from databases and modify the tables. And if you talk about the use of PL SQL, so it is used for creating web applications and server pages. If you talk about the processing speed of SQL, so here this processing speed is very low. And in case of PL SQL, the processing speed is comparatively faster than the SQL. I hope this clearly highlights the difference between SQL and PL SQL. So the next question is, what are the advantages of PL SQL functions? So as you can see on the screen, these are the advantages of PL SQL functions. So the first point over here is it has tight interaction with SQL. Next, it has high performance and productivity. After that, you also have high portability and scalability with PL SQL functions. The next point is that PL SQL functions are highly flexible and secure. And the last point over here is it supports the development of web applications and server pages. The next question over here is difference between char and varchar data types in SQL. So as you can see on the screen, this table is here to highlight the difference between char and varchar. So in char, it is a fixed length character string data type. And in case of varchar, it is variable length character string data type. So in case of char, the data type can be a single byte or multiple bytes. In case of varchar, it can accept character strings up to 255 bytes. So the char data type can be used when the length of the character is known, whereas varchar data type is used when the character length is not known beforehand or it is not clear. The character data type uses static memory location, whereas the varchar data type uses the dynamic memory location. So char data type is used when the character length of the data is same, and varchar data type is used when the character length of the data is variable or not same. The next question over here is, how can you avoid duplicate keys in SQL? We can eliminate duplicate keys in SQL by using the following methods. So if you use these following methods, so you will be easily able to avoid duplicate keys in SQL. So the first point over here is using insert into select. Then you can use where not in. Then you can also use where not exists and then the condition. You can also use if not exists. And the last point over here is using count star equal to 0. And you must note here that the star is mentioned in the round braces. The next question over here is brief the factors that affect the functionalities of a database. So basically, there are 5 factors that affect the functionality of the database, as you can see on the screen. And these 5 factors are workload, throughput, resources, optimization, and contention. The next question over here is list out the factors that affect the query performance. So as you can see on the screen, these are the factors that affect the performance of the queries, such as number of nodes, processors, and slices. After that, node types, data distribution, data sort order, dataset size, concurrent operations, query structure, and code compilation. The next question over here is difference between union and intersect statements. So if we talk about the union, it is the operator that returns a single result set for 2 separate queries. And this operator functions based on specific conditions. And now if you talk about the syntax of union, so here basically what you do is you write the first query, and then you use this keyword, or you can say the operator union, and then you write the second query. And if you talk about intersect, so this operator returns only the distinct rows from 2 separate queries. And the syntax for that is query 1, then the intersect word, and then the query 2. The next question is, what is the difference between drop and truncate statements? So as you can see on the screen, this is the table that highlights the difference between drop and truncate statement. So if you use drop, so it removes the whole database. And if you use the truncate statement, it removes a table or data or index. So if you talk about the drop, so all of the constraints will be removed after the execution of the drop function. And if you talk about the truncate statements, so constraints don't get affected because of the execution of truncate statement. So in case of drop statement, so the structure of the data will also be removed. And in case of truncate, the structure of the data will not be affected. The drop is a relatively slow process, whereas the truncate is faster than the drop statement. The next question is, what is the use of select distinct statement? So basically, this statement is used to select distinct values from a table. So the table might consist of many duplicate records, whereas this statement helps to return only distinct values. So if you want to select unique records or distinct records from a table, so here in that case, you can use the select distinct statement. And how do you use that statement? So this is the syntax, as you can see on the screen. Select distinct, column 1, column 2, or you can specify as number of columns that you want from the table name. The next question is, how can you differentiate between the rank and dense rank functions? So both rank and dense rank are used as the ranking functions, which perform the ranking of the data based on specific conditions. So when the rank statement is executed, it returns ranking of values of a table based on specific conditions. So at the same time, the result set skips positions in the ranking if there are the same values. So simply put, there will be discontinuity in the numbering of the ranking. On the other hand, when the rank dense function is executed, it doesn't skip any position in the ranking of values, even though there are the same values present in the table. So it returns continuous numbering of the ranking. So just to elaborate the difference between rank and dense rank functions, so here I've attached a screenshot. Okay, so as you can see here, we have this various columns for this table, such as R, DR, first name, last name, month, and sold products. So here R is basically the rank function and DR is the dense rank function. So as you can see here, the values for R and DR are not the same. The next question is, what is the difference between in and between operators? So both in and between operators are used to return the records for multiple values from a table. The in operator is used to return the records from a table for multiple values specified in the statement. On the other side, between operator is used to return the records within a range of values specified in the statement. This is the syntax for the in statement and between statement. Now, if you talk about the in statement, so how do you use this in clause, or you can say the in operator? I repeat. So basically, This is how you use the in operator. So let's consider this query. Select star from table name, where column name, in, and the number of values that you want. And if you talk about the between statement, so here you can see this query. Select star from table name, where column name between value 1 and value 2. So this is the syntax for in operator and between operator. The next question is compare stuff and replace statements. So both stuff and replace statements are used to replace characters in a string. So the stuff statement inserts the specific characters in a string, replacing the existing characters. In comparison, the replace statement replaces the existing characters with specific characters throughout the string. Okay, so just to understand the difference. So for the stuff statement, what you can do is select stuff. This is the parameter that you're using, 2, 3, and AJA. So here the output will be RAJAN or Rajan. Instead of Raman, we will get Rajan. So how do you get Rajan? So instead of AMA, you are replacing AJA. So RAJAN. And for the replace statement, select replace Ramanathan, AN, and AR. So wherever AN will be present in the statement, it will be replaced by AR. So here AN is present on 2 occasions. In this part, AN, as you can see, and this the end part, AN. So RAM, AR, AT, HAR. So I hope you have understood the difference between stuff and replace statement. The next question is, what do you mean by commit in SQL? So commit statement allows saving the changes made in a transaction permanently. So once a transaction is committed, the previous values cannot be retrieved. And if you talk about the syntax of commit, so here you can see select star from star, where incentive equal to 1000. And after this query is executed, what you do is you write just commit and you hit enter button. So this will ensure that this following query or the above query is executed and committed. The next question is, what is the use of grant statement? So this statement grants permissions for users to perform operations such as select, update, insert, delete, or any other operations on tables and views. So for example, if you would like to provide access to a user for updating tables, then the following statement must be used. Apart from this, the user too can grant permission to other users. Okay, so just for example, we have used this statement over here. So grant update on table name to user with grant option. So basically, this statement grants permissions to the user. So one user can grant permission to the other users. The next question over here is, what is the difference between black box testing and white box testing? So as you can see on the screen, this is the table that highlights this difference between black box testing and white box testing. So in case of black box testing, the internal structure of the program is hidden to the testers. Whereas in case of white box testing, testers know the internal structure of the program. Okay, so basically this difference can be easily known from the name of the testing. So black box and white box. Here it is unknown, here it is known. In case of black box testing, it is performed by software testers, and the white box testing is performed by software developers. In case of black box testing, testing is known as the outer or the external software testing. And in case of white box testing, testing is known as the inner or the internal software testing. In case of black box testing, programming knowledge is not essential for the testing candidates. In case of white box testing, programming knowledge is essential for testers or the developers, since it is performed by developers. Okay, and the last point over here is functional testing, non-functional testing, and regression testings are the types of black box testing. And if you talk about the various types of white box testing, so here you have path testing, loop testing, condition testing, and so on. The next question over here is, what do you mean by ETL in SQL? So ETL is nothing but extraction, transformation, and loading. So if you talk about extraction, so it is about extracting data from the source, which can be a data warehouse, CRM, database, and so on. After fetching or extracting the data, the next step is the transformation of data. So it includes many processes such as data cleansing, data standardization, removing duplicate values, data verification, sorting, and so on. And the last step is the loading of the data. So once the data is extracted and transformed, what you do is you load the data into the target. So this is the process of loading the transformed data into a new destination. So there are basically two types of data loading, which is full loading and the incremental loading. So in case of full loading, all of the data is loaded at one go. In case of incremental loading, the data is loaded into the destination in various steps. The next question over here is, what do you mean by nested triggers? If a trigger fires another trigger while being executed, then it is known as the nested trigger. So nested triggers can be fired while executing DDL and DML operations such as insert, drop, and update. So nested triggers can help to back up the rows affected by the previous trigger. So there are basically two types of nested triggers, such as after triggers and instead of triggers. The next question is how to insert multiple rows in a database table in SQL. So we can use the insert into statement to insert multiple rows into a database table in SQL. And if you talk about the syntax, so this is the syntax such as insert into table name, then the values and the values that you want to insert. Okay, value 1, value 2, value 3, value 4, and so on. So the inserted data can be selected using the following syntax. As you can see on the screen, this is the simple query. Select star from table name. The next question is, what do you mean by live log in SQL? So when two processes repeat the same type of interaction continuously without making any progress in the query processing, it leads to a live log situation in the SQL server. So there is no waiting state in live log, but the processes are happening concurrently, forming a closed loop. For example, let us assume that a process A holds a resource D1 and requests a resource D2. At the same time, let us assume that a process B holds a resource D2 and requests the resource D1. So this situation will not make any progress until any of the processes should either drop holding a resource or drop requesting a resource. The next question is, what do you mean by equi-join and non-equi-join? So equi-join creates a join operation to match the values of the relative tables. And if you talk about the syntax of equi-join, so as you can see on the screen, this is the syntax. Select column list, like you can specify the column names over here from the tables such as table 1, table 2, and so on. And then you specify the condition using the where, such as table1.column name equal to table2.column name. So based upon these conditions, the query will be executed. And in case of non-equi-join, so it performs join operations except equal. So this operator works with less than, greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to conditions. So if you talk about the syntax of non-equi-join, so here you can see select star from table 1, table 2, where then you specify the condition table 1 name dot column, and then the operators less than, greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to, and then the table 2 column name. So this is basically the difference between equi-join and non-equi-join. The next question over here is, what are the different types of SQL sandboxes? So basically there are three types of SQL sandboxes, such as safe access, unsafe access, and external access sandbox. The next question over here is, what do you mean by log escalation? So log escalation is a process of converting row and page logs into table logs. So here you must understand that reduction of log escalation would increase the server performance. So to improve the performance, we need to keep the transaction short and reduce the log footprints in queries to as low as possible. So besides that, we can disable log escalation at the table and instance levels, but it is not recommended to do so. The next question is, how can you update a table using SQL? So the update statement allows you to update a database table in SQL. So after the execution, one or more columns in the table will be replaced by new values. And now if you talk about the syntax of update, so as you can see on the screen, this is the syntax such as update table name. And then what you have to do is you have to set the columns to the new values. Okay, so here the previous column names will be replaced by new column names, such as column name equal to new value, column 2 equal to new value, and so on. And then you can specify the condition if you have using the where clause. Okay, so this is how you update a table using SQL. The next question is how to create a stored procedure using T-SQL. So basically there are 3 steps to create a stored procedure using T-SQL. So in the first step, you connect to the instance of a database engine in the Object Explorer. Then you click on the new query from the files menu. And after that, you copy and paste the sample code in the query window. Okay, so just for your reference, we are using this sample code. Okay, and if you carefully observe, so here we are using the database, then we have the go statement, and then we are creating the procedure. Okay, so for creating the procedure or the stored procedure, what we do, create procedure, and then the name of that procedure, and then the various columns that we have, and then we use the alias using AS. Okay, so set no count on, select first name, last name division from HR.employee division history, where first name equal to this first name and last name equal to this last name, and end date is null, and then the go statement. So basically, we have created a stored procedure over here. And once you write this stored procedure, what you can do is you can execute one statement to run the newly created stored procedure. And which is that statement? Execute hr.get employees test2, and then this columns. The next question over here is, what do you mean by delete cascade constraint? So when a foreign key is created under this option, and if a referenced row in the parent table is deleted, the referencing rows in the child table also get deleted. On the similar tracks, when a referenced row is updated in a parent table, the referencing rows in the child table also get updated. The next question is, what are the different types of indexes in SQL? So basically, there are 4 types of indexes in SQL, such as single column indexes, unique indexes, composite indexes, and implicit indexes. The next question is, what do you mean by auto increment? So auto increment is a unique number that will be generated when a new record is inserted into a table. So mainly it acts as the primary key for the table. Okay, and if you talk about the syntax of auto increment, so here you can see identity, and then in round braces you have the starting value and the increment value. The next question over here is, what do you mean by pattern matching? So we can use the like command in SQL to identify patterns in a database using character strings. So generally a pattern may be identified using a wildcard character or regular characters. So pattern matching can be performed using both the wildcard characters and string comparison characters. However, the pattern matching through wildcard characters is more flexible than using the string comparison characters. The next question is, what is the difference between blocking and deadlocking? So blocking is a phenomenon that occurs when a process blocks a resource A and at the same time, the resource is requested by another process B. So now the process B can access the resource A only when the process A releases the lock. So the process B has to wait until the process A releases the lock. So the SQL server doesn't interfere and stops any process in this scenario. On the contrary, the deadlocking phenomenon occurs when a resource A is locked by process A and the same resource is requested by another process B. So similarly, a resource B is locked by process B and requested by process A. So this scenario causes a deadlock situation and it is a never-ending process. So the SQL server interferes and voluntarily stops any one of the processes to remove the deadlock. So in case of blocking, the SQL server doesn't interfere. And in case of deadlock, the SQL server interferes and stops the processes. The next question is, what is the difference between coalesce and is null function? So coalesce function returns the first value that is non-null in the expression, whereas is null is used to replace the known, I repeat, whereas isNull is used to replace the non-null values in the expression. So if you talk about the syntax for coalesce function, so here you can see select columns, coalesce and the expressions from table name. And the expressions are specified in the round brackets. And if you talk about the syntax of isNull, so here you can see select columns, then comma and isNull, and then you have to specify the column names and the value to replace with. And then you have the from table name. So this was the difference between coalesce and isNull function. The next question over here is, what is the difference between NVL and NVL2 functions in SQL? So both the functions are used to find whether the first argument in the expression is null. The NVL function in the SQL query returns the second argument if the first argument is null. Otherwise, it returns the first argument. The NVL2 function in SQL query returns the third argument if the first argument is null. Otherwise, the second argument is returned. I hope this highlights the difference between NVL and NVL2 functions. So with this, we have come to the end of the session on SQL interview questions.